welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah. Happy to be with you for this second episode of the week. As we get started, I do want to remind you to please like, follow, and subscribe on whatever platform you're either listening to or watching the episode on. Helps the algorithm, gets the podcast out to more listeners such as yourselves. If you are of a mind to and you want to help the podcast and the network as a whole in another way, you can do so by going to gsmcpodcast.net. There you can leave us a donation of some kind of your choosing. And like I said, that helps not only the podcast, but the network as a whole, neither of which would exist without you and your support throughout all of the years that we have been around. As always, thank you so much for your support, past, present, and future. It is greatly appreciated. It is Friday. It is Good Friday for those of you who may be celebrating Holy Week this week. I think it was just recently Passover as well, right? So for my Jewish listeners, I cannot remember the Hebrew that you say to wish a happy Passover. Is it happy Passover? I should know that. That's on my goal too. That's on my list of things to remember because I know the words. Probably don't know how to pronounce them correctly. Also need to learn that. But for all the things that are happening this week, if you are celebrating, I hope that you have a wonderful time with friends and family. If it's just a regular week for you, that's great too. I hope you're having some good weather. It is finally beautiful and sunny here. Just the perfect spring temperature. Gorgeous, sunny, blue skies, wonderful temperature, not too hot, not too cold. Not to rub it in if you are not experiencing that, but it is lovely and I am enjoying every moment of it that I can. It has been a good week, lots of good students, hard week. If you've been listening for a while, then you know that my father died 4 years ago. Yesterday was the 4-year anniversary of his death, so I was thinking about him all day and remembering all of my favorite stories about him and just wonderful memories of my dad, who I could take up way too much of this podcast telling you about. But yesterday I was thinking about the camping trips that we used to take. He would take my brother and me camping in the summer. We would hike in and hike into a lake, fish, camp overnight, and then hike back out the next day. He was always very kind and, a sweet dad who would carry my sleeping bag as well as his sleeping bag and the tent and, probably some of my brother's stuff too. I don't really know. I know I just had a little tiny backpack, but I thought I was the coolest thing hiking and camping with my dad and my big brother. But he told me, you're little and you might get tired. So if at any point you get tired, you just sit down and rest. It's okay. Me, being the literal child that I was, I'd get tired and I would plunk my butt down in the middle of the trail. Didn't matter if my dad or my brother was directly behind me. I gave no warning. I don't remember this, but I have been told that I would just sit down in the middle of the trail. I'm so glad no one tripped over me because that would have been bad because we were hiking far away from the car. Yeah, no one got hurt. But still, I can just picture little me. Plus, I used to be blonde as a child. I was blonde, and my mom, that doesn't really have anything to do with anything now that I think about it, but my mom would braid my hair for the trip so that my dad didn't have to deal with it. So she'd put it in 2 braids, and then I, being the little 80s child that I was, thought it was really cool to roll up a kerchief and tie it around my head. My brother, to this day, still teases me about looking like Willie Nelson every time we would go camping. So those are just some memories that I was thinking of yesterday, thinking about my dad and honoring his memory. So I thought I would share them with you as well. And since this is a podcast today specifically about telling stories, seemed like a good place to start. So yes, I have a storyteller with me today. I am talking to Corey Rosen. We are talking about his book, A Story for Everything, Mastering Diverse Storytelling for Any Occasion. This is a companion book to his first book called Your Story Well Told. Let me give you the description of this book. People forget facts and figures, but people never forget a good story. In this standalone companion to Your Story Well Told, author and the Moth StorySLAM's host, Corey Rosen, provides a practical go-to guide on crafting and delivering impactful narratives for professional, academic, and personal success. Combining humor, heart, and advice, Rosen demystifies storytelling, making it accessible for beginners while enriching experienced storytellers. Organized into 3 parts: business, school, and family, the book addresses diverse storytelling needs, from job interviews and persuasive pitches to college essays, eulogies, and wedding toasts. Each chapter features vivid examples and easy-to-follow exercises, helping readers tap into their life experiences and transform them into compelling stories. Through personal anecdotes and structured exercises, readers learn to reflect on their experiences, structure their stories effectively, and share them with authenticity. Whether you're a doctor, teacher, salesman, parent, or a friend, A Story for Everything empowers you to elevate your communication and enrich your relationships. If you want to make an unforgettable impression, this book was made for you. And so again, that is the description of A Story for Everything, Mastering Diverse Storytelling for Any Occasion. And you heard that it's divided into the 3 parts: business, school, family. So the business section, if you have an interview coming up, maybe you are trying to figure out how to write your resignation letter or your exit interview, or different ways of managing a team and how you can do that differently. Maybe through story, if you've ever thought about that, or maybe you've never thought about that and you want to know more, then that section is for you. School, writing college essays, oh my gosh, I had to write so many personal essays in grad school that I really wish I'd had this book then, because I think it would have been helpful in writing some of those very personal essays I had to write during graduate school. But there's lots of things that we write essays for, stories for school reasons. Maybe it's fundraising. He talks about fundraising if you're a member of a PTA or something along those lines. And then family. Maybe you have to give a eulogy. Maybe it's a wedding toast. Maybe it's just telling a story about a family member. This does not have to be read straight through and in one sitting. If you have a specific instance that you want to find out how you can tell a story for that incident, for that event, then you can pick it up, look through the table of contents, find that chapter, and read and see what ideas are sparked. I got so many ideas from this book that I'm hoping to remember, or at least remember to go back to the book in the future to remind myself of what those ideas were. Yes, I wrote some of them down, but not just ideas, but like go back and look for times when I need inspiration and ideas. At any rate, we're going to let Corey talk about the writing of this book. Once again, it is A Story for Everything, and the author is Corey Rosen. Let's go to that interview with Corey. Hi, Corey. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Sarah. It's so good to be here. I enjoy listening to your show, and I'm happy to be talking with you today.
Well, thank you. And I'm happy to be talking with you as well. We're talking about your new book, and I want to make sure I get the title right: A Story for Everything, Mastering Diverse Stories for Any Occasion. Storytelling for any occasion, excuse me. Before we get to the book, though, would you just take a moment to introduce yourself so my listeners can get to know you?
You bet. My name is Corey Rosen. I host the Moth Story Slams in the Berkeley, California, San Francisco Bay Area. I grew up as a storyteller in different formats. I was a kid actor, a theater kid. I went to summer camps doing that. I graduated from high school and decided to pivot more towards filmmaking. I wanted to be creating media. And so I pursued that in my career, but I could never kind of get away from 2 things: from being on stages and telling stories in that way, and improvisation, because on one hand, I credited it to maybe a kind of laziness of not wanting to remember scripts, but also the rush, the joy of making something up from nothing.
Yeah.
And through my life, something amazing kind of emerged, which was this through line of all these things that I was doing, whether it was creating media, whether it was being on stages, whether it was improvising. And it was, of course, stories, the stories that were around me that were either invented or happening in real life. And so when the universe of performative storytelling showed up in the formats, things like The Moth, which is also a radio show and a podcast, I found my home. I found the place that kind of converged all the things I like to do. So that was as a storyteller, that was as an improviser, because even when you're telling a true story, you're having to show up in this moment and tell the
Hmm.
story that shows up right here. So my work, and really I feel like it's become my cause, my motivation, my inspiration is telling stories and really working with people and helping them find and tell and shape their stories in every context.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And this book is a companion book to Your Story Well Told. So, what was the inspiration for that, which then led into the new book?
Great question. So I've been hosting these live storytelling shows at the Moth for 13 years now. And when I started, I was, as we do when we start any job, I was figuring it out as we go along. And as I got a handle on it, people started to ask me whether I wanted to teach classes about it. So I created storytelling workshops where I would gather 8 to 10 people. We would all tell stories in all of those workshops. And through it, we would develop our content, develop our stories, and put on our own shows. And that was the context that I created my first book, which is called Your Story Well Told. So it's basically a handbook for anybody to say, I want to find ideas, shape them, and then tell them. And
Hmm.
so when I was telling people about that, promoting that book a few years ago, people would say, that's so great for people who do that. I don't do that. So I don't
Hmm.
need your book. And I would say, well, what do you do? And they're like, oh, well, I'm a teacher. I'm like, you're a storyteller.
Right.
Or they're like, I'm a lawyer. I'm like, you're a storyteller. I'm a doctor. You're a story. Like, we're all telling stories to our patients, to our clients, to judges, to police, to ask for a job promotion,
Hmm.
to ask for fundraising for our kids' school. All of these contexts, when looked at through like this lens that like everything could be a story or maybe is better as a story. So the first book is this handbook for how to find and craft and tell those stories. The second book is how to use those in real life, how
Yeah.
everybody could tell stories better. So in some ways, it's a reference book. You might say, like, well, I don't need all of this, but I have to write a toast for my sister's wedding or my,
Hmm.
grandpa's eulogy or something. And so there's chapters on all of those things. But of course, there's information throughout everything. And I just finished the recording of my audio version of the book.
Okay.
So it feels weird to admit this, but it was pretty good. Like, I mean, I guess you're
Own
supposed to
it.
say that, but like
Yeah.
I wrote it, so of course I'm going to be extra critical of my own self and stories and writing. But I would finish like a chapter, I'd be like, it was pretty good, you know.
Yeah.
And I got emotional and laughing at my own writing and tearing up. So I think it's good. Having just read it again
Yeah.
after working on it for years, I will
Right.
say I highly endorse A Story for Everything by Corey Rosen.
Good. Good. You are Corey Rosen. You support this message.
I, Corey Rosen, endorse this message. Thank you,
Yes,
Sarah.
good. But that's good because sometimes it's hard to go back to something we wrote before. And
Yeah.
it's always a good feeling when you think, "Hey, you know what? This is actually good."
Yeah. Yeah. Have you had that experience? Like, have you gone back to anything that you've written and found like, I like this. This is good. Or the
Yeah.
opposite? In
Yeah,
what sense?
I'm always pleasantly surprised when it's the, "Hey, oh, this is better than I remember."
Right.
So
I like
that's a
that.
nice feeling.
Yeah.
Um,
I wonder, not to veer it in this direction, but there's a lot of people that are using, say, tools to help them with their writing. I
right.
wonder how many of those people are going to look back and be like, I didn't write that. I want to give praise and credit to all the people who are still writing and
Yeah.
doing their own writing, because I think that that's how we really express ourselves. There are technical things maybe we could ask the robots to do right
Yeah.
now, but just word to the writers in the universe that are listening to this, you're
Yeah.
doing the right thing. Keep it going.
I saw a great TikTok yesterday, just exactly what you were saying. There was an author, and I can't remember his username, so I apologize to him wherever he is, but he was saying, yes, I could give I could give the robots all of my writing and it could
Mm-hmm.
write something, but
Mm-hmm.
that AI has not snuck out of the house at 15 to go smoke cigarettes behind the garage. That AI
Yeah.
has not,
Yeah.
and he listed all of these things. So it could write the
Yeah.
words, but it can't convey the experience.
Those experiences are what makes us, and I
Hmm.
think that that's what I love to talk with people too that might be feeling stuck in whatever capacity as writers or storytellers or journalists or memoirists or whatever, that like those moments, those sneaking out of the house to smoke a cigarette are about more than sneaking out of the house to smoke a cigarette. Those are
Yeah.
about who not who you are, but who you were, how you became who you are,
Hmm.
what rebellion felt like, what sadness looked like when you were a certain age. Like these are to me, in a way, the most impactful stories. A lot of times people think that, well, my story needs to be a big thing that happened, the
Yeah.
big job, the big breakup, the big whatever, like some accident, catastrophes are the only stories you've got. You're wrong. The little moments in your life. I mean, I had a situation recently. I was in Virginia doing some book events there, and I was running late for one of the events that I was brought to Virginia to do. I'm from
Mm.
California, and I got a speeding ticket,
Oh,
and I was so embarrassed. I mean, I'm
yeah.
here like rushing to do this thing that I'm there to do, and then it's like this like warning in my face, like you messed up and you deserve it. And I was embarrassed to be later, and I was embarrassed to have gotten the speeding ticket. But I walk in this room, and it was I didn't even realize who I was speaking to is a room full of lawyers, and three of them handed me their business cards.
Of
And
course.
one of them just yesterday called me and said, "Good news, we've reduced your reckless driving to speeding. So it's not going to affect my insurance. It's not going to, there's no jail time." Although, I mean, there was like some scary letters I was getting.
Yeah.
So like these are the moments. Like I take these now, and I'm a very safe driver now. Like ever since then, this is, in December when I was in Virginia, like
Yeah.
I've noticed that I'm like, I'm in no rush. I don't need to speed. I don't need to rush anywhere.
Right.
Like the little things, the things that happen to us in some ways are instructive to who we are, and they could become our stories.
Yeah. Right. You never know
You
what
never know.
moment is
Yeah.
going to, and you never know what moment, even years later, you'll look back on and go, oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like that he said the little things can become part of our story. The little things can become our story. The little things are our story, right? Our story as a whole is made up of all of those little pieces. You can see all of the little details that just, I don't know, like pixels forming the entire image. And you never know when those stories might be the perfect story that you need to tell in a given situation. But just as he told with the getting pulled over story and how he then encountered a room full of lawyers, you might not have quite that specific of a connection, but you never know when you might make a connection. And it might be a connection that you make years later. That's happened to me, where I think, oh wow, that makes sense. That this is what I have now learned from that previous incident. So you just never know. But we're going to take our first break of this episode. When we come back, he'll be talking a little bit more about improv and how improv has been and is part of this process of storytelling. You are tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
Mm-hmm. 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 Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to work, cause my boss is a jerk, and I'm not even that paid. I need a change in my life, cause I don't feel alive, and there's nothing that makes me happy. Hold my beer for a minute, I'm about to quit my job, cash in for a ticket. I'm going on a trip and I don't plan to visit. I'm gonna stay there till I feel like I'm winning, and this is just the beginning. I need a big change, help me feel like living. I need a big swing, home runs I'm hitting, and I'll never look back, moving on till I get it all. And we all got dreams, we all want things, but what you gonna do for it? How you gonna move for it? What you gonna be? And do you believe you can do anything?
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with Corey Rosen. We are talking about stories. And as we get into this second segment, just your second and final reminder that if you want to be part of the story of GSMC, you can do so in a lot of ways. But one of those ways is to go to gsmcpodcast.net. Your donations help this podcast continue to grow and thrive and get out to more readers and listeners and viewers such as yourselves. So thank you very much. Again, that address is gsmcpodcast.net. Before the break, Corey was talking about how the little everyday things can become parts of our story, how everything in our lives can become everything that happens in our lives are the building blocks for our bigger story. But let's go ahead and return to the conversation with Corey.
I actually have, and this is something that I put in my book too, is I have like games. Because I come from this world of improvisation. It's not to turn people into improvisers, but I think and I find that playing these kind of activities, exercises, creative experiences has a real powerful way of awakening those, like remembering those moments and those memories that might turn into characters in our stories if we're writing fiction, or they might turn into true things that we're writing about because we're kind of reconnecting with our memories in those moments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you mentioned improv exercises. There are you give homework or there are tasks throughout the book. So talk about that more interactive nature of the book as well.
Sure. So I believe that, especially the concept and the subject of storytelling, you're not going to be a better storyteller by listening to or reading
Right.
what I think about storytelling. The way to do it and get better at it is doing it. So it might stink. You might be not good at it, or you might be okay at it, but doing it, the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. So I do have little assignments or homework or activities, exercises peppered throughout, because the idea is here's something that you could take into your classroom. You could take these activities and use them with your community or use them with yourself. They're just ways of making it more interactive and engaging. So it could just be a book of my stories. It could be just a book of rules or tips. But my friend Glenn Washington, who hosts a show called Snap Judgment, he said one of, I think, the most complimentary things anybody's ever said about me. And he is somebody that I hold in incredibly high regard and esteem. And he said that this is not a book of rules, it's a book of doors. And I think that's a really flattering thing, that, the book has pathways that anyone who reads it and experiences it can then find their own stories. That's my hope, it's full of stories. You can read my stories, but it's also, those are indicators or invitations to say, what's yours?
Yeah. So for all of my Gen X listeners, this is a choose your own adventure for writing your own story.
Totally. And for those millennials, this is a platform game where you can it's an open universe where you can explore role play. It's an active cosplay.
Yes. I do not know what it would be for Gen Z. I would have to ask my Gen Z nieces.
I don't either.
Okay. The book is divided into 3 sections. So we've got stories for business or a work interview. We've got stories for, you mentioned specifically like fundraising, those kinds of things.
School. I love those in the school.
Yeah, school. Yeah. And then more personal, like you said, giving a toast, doing a eulogy. So why those 3? And can you talk a little bit about those sections?
Of course. So these are 3, I would say probably the 3 biggest areas where storytelling shows up in real life, let's call it. This is not, again, about being on stages, but it's about being in a job interview, writing a cover letter, even writing not a rejection letter, but what do I call it? Like a resignation letter. How you leave a job makes an impact. It can affect whether you come back to work with them again, or whether you leave, with fingers blazing and you're, insulting the people that you worked with. There's ways of setting a tone and storytelling in these contexts. So again, like asking for a raise, managing people can be more effectively done with stories. Here's an example of something that I did, or that you did, or that we did, that could help picture you in an environment that you would work well with this, or you deserve some credit for something that you have done. So all of those kinds of topics are lumped into that first section about work or business kind of stories. The second one is I frame it around school. And so I think about that. I mean, I have high school senior right now, so she's been writing college essays. I think about that process of like, how do you frame an experience into something that could help show who you are? So again, this could apply to a job, but also to school. But yeah, as a parent too, I've been on many a committee and trying to either fundraise or ask for money. And time and again, I mean, we all get these emails all the time. And it's like, I see what you're doing. Either I'm going to give or I'm not going to give. And yet storytelling is a way of, again, like grabbing people's attention, helping them understand, like empathize with you. And we all enjoy a story. So if you harness that and you work that into these things, so whether you're writing grants or you're writing fundraising pitches, there are some tools that I suggest, and I give some examples of how you can find those. And then lastly, kind of life, which is a little bit of a big bucket to put things in, but I look at situations that often are scary to people. So having to write a big toast where they might have to get up in front of people, or a eulogy, or even like, there's people in my family who are experiencing memory care issues. And so how might we use storytelling to reconnect and stay connected with them or tell their stories? There's a beautiful quote about, we essentially die 3 deaths. I don't know if you've heard this before, but when we physically die, when the last person that we know or who knows us dies, and when the last story is told about us. So when we are thinking in the legacy game, like, what stories do I want my kids, my grandkids to remember to tell about me? Thinking about ourselves through stories, not just things that happen, but why, is impactful and powerful. So, so those are the subsections. And in doing those, of course, it lit up for me. Like, I've got 3 more things that I'm writing about now for my follow-up book, which are 3 different topics that I'm going to be exploring. And also, I like talking with people who do these things. So it's not just what I think of them, because I know things, but I'm not the expert on all things. So I did a lot of interviewing and talking with people, and really just diving into how might we do these kind of things differently, or authentically to ourselves.
When you were talking about the stories of people's lives and what will we remember, and those sorts of things, I used to work with a lot of families who were grieving, who were planning funerals, and reading obituaries is sad anyway, but it always made me really sad when it said something like, she was 88 years old and she loved to garden. And I'm like, that's it? That's what you're giving me for 88 years?
Exactly. Yeah. But go into that. Tell me about her garden. Tell me about her flowers, and tell me about why she loved to garden and what it did for her. If your whole eulogy was just a story about visiting grandma in her garden and the times that I had with her gardening, and kind of like that experience of quietly digging in the earth and feeling her and knowing what she experienced in her childhood and her life and her journeys and her struggles. Your eulogy should not be reading the obituary. That is not the place to catalog what they have done. It's to talk about who they are and who they were to you. I think every funeral, in some ways is a celebration of like their legacy and what impact they had on you, so that the people there, because not everybody that goes to a funeral knows them as well as the people who are speaking, but we should walk away feeling like, wow, what a life, what a person, and almost like we got to know them better through the stories that you told, not like we read the same or we heard the same thing that was listed in the paper. That's not like doing your best to honor them.
And you give a good example in one of the chapters, with the chapter talking about eulogies, and it's a nice way to just kind of just ever so slightly flip the question. Instead of starting with, if you don't know me, my name is Sarah, and she was, X was my great aunt or whatever, but starting with, you were just talking about gardening, and I remember gardening with my great aunt as a child. It's the
Yeah.
same thing, just
Yeah.
flipped ever so slightly to put the focus on the person that you're celebrating.
Yeah. There was, yeah, one of the examples I given there was from my wife's cousin who passed
Hmm.
too way too young. And she had this thing where she used to put a safety pin on her jacket. And wherever she was, she wore a safety pin. And if people ask you, like, why do you have a safety pin? And she would say, well, you never know when you're going to need a safety pin, which is super true, right? So then she
Yeah.
goes on and she tells the story and she talks about her and she talks about experiences. And at the end of her eulogy, she says at the back of the room, there was like a few things back there she invited people to take. There was some artwork that she had drawn and designed, so she had printed them into postcards. So take that, send it to somebody that you were thinking of. There's keys back there. She collected keys. That was her fascination, was just used keys, not even her own keys. Take a
Hmm.
key and you'll carry a piece of her with you. And if you don't want any of those, take a safety pin because you never know when you're going to need a safety pin.
Yeah.
So these are little storytelling techniques, capping it, book ending your eulogy, your story with something that you calls back to the beginning of your story, has a real way of actually shaping a list of things that somebody has done into a feeling and into a story. So those
Hmm.
are some things and some, I think, examples of how, again, like storyfying, making things into or feel like stories have a crazy way of then we remember that.
Yeah.
We didn't just hear that. That was interesting. That was nice what you said, but I'm impacted by that. I think about that now when I see safety pins. I'm like, that's a useful thing to have.
Yeah. I like the word that Corey used, storifying. I think that's the same concept that he was talking about when we went to our first break, was how everyday events, how everything in our lives can become part of the bigger story of our lives. But how do events or even objects encapsulate certain aspects of our lives and our stories? And I think the example he gave of his wife preparing the eulogy and all of the pieces that she incorporated into that eulogy and all of the seemingly mundane objects like a safety pin or keys became part of that bigger story, and sharing that story with everyone who attended that service was really meaningful in many ways. But let's go ahead and take our second break of this episode. When we come back, okay, we have stories. Now what? How do we incorporate those stories? What do we do with them? You are tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Corey Rosen. Before the break, he was giving an example of how stories can be made more meaningful and enriched by personal objects or even mundane details that might not seem that big or important, but can really add to the story as a whole, add to the person's story as a whole. Let's go ahead and return to the conversation with Corey. So most people, not most people, all people have stories. Maybe not all people think in stories. So what do you say to people who are, that they're going to do a job interview and they want to tell more stories, but they're
Yeah,
not quite sure where to start. So what do you say for people as to where to start?
great. The first place to start, I have an answer for this because I get asked this quite a lot. If you're going to be a better storyteller, become a better listener.
Hmm.
So don't start by telling stories, start by noticing, start by listening to how people tell stories. So we learn a lot by the stories that we hear that are around us. So if you're thinking like, I'm not good at that, or I don't know if I'm good at that, just start noticing, start noticing how other people tell their stories. I think that's step one. Step two, there are some very simple kind of frameworks that are easy to learn. I have them in my books. Things like the Ken Adams story spine, which is just a sequence of 9 phrases, like once upon a time, like what's the context of the story, every day, what was normal, until one day something different happened. Just starting an experience in that way of giving background context, what's normal and then what's changed, on its own opens up a little curiosity. Somebody listening is like, oh, like you feel like you're being told the story when somebody paints that picture and doesn't just necessarily drop you into it or tell you the thing that happened, but set up some reason to care, some stakes, some things like that. And it doesn't have to be super interesting. I mean, I'm not saying that my speeding in Virginia story was the most interesting, but you had context. I was an author doing a tour. I was running late, so I was driving. We can relate to that. And this one day that I got pulled over. So it led to this sequence of cause and effect. Because of that, I felt worse. Because of that, I went to my meeting feeling worse. Because of that, I was surprised to learn that it was a room full of lawyers. So there's a twist, there's a surprise. And then ever since then, the resolution is I've changed how I drive. I am being more careful and more cautious. I also did attend online driving school, so that helps. But looking at things like that, simple structures and things to just try. And as you start to sort of internally process these things, I think you get better, but again, I'm going to say you're not going to get better by reading about it. You're going to get better by trying it. So read my book, but use it to get out there and tell stories.
You mentioned earlier asking a lot of questions, talking to a lot of people. So in the course of your research, was there anything that particularly stood out or resonated with you?
So many. I mean, the best thing about writing books about storytelling is you get to hear stories.
Yeah.
So everyone I talk to, one of my favorites is my friend who's a teacher in New Jersey named Diane Murray. And she's a second grade teacher who was writing a story about how she used something from my first book in her school. So as a teacher, there was a situation where the principal sent out an email saying that we're discontinuing the Pets in Classrooms program, and that's it. Like it was deemed, it was a decision that was sort of unilaterally made about the school. And she wanted to write back and say, no, I want to have pets I love pets in my classrooms, like we do, or have an argument or have a meeting and talk about it. But I got to listen to her tell me, and she shared with me, she told a story. Instead of just arguing, she wrote a story about a student and about the impact that having a pet in the classroom had on that student who had a difficult time focusing and concentrating, except when he had the class chinchilla in the hood, like in the pouch of his hoodie. And he could sit there and focus for long periods of time. It was a support animal, and it had a big impact, not only on their focus, but also on their confidence, because they became the class expert in chinchillas. People would come and ask them questions, and they took real pride and ownership, and they became proud of themselves in their knowledge and wisdom about this thing. Long story short, policy was changed. A story did the work. So in my research for this, I got to hear stories about stories, and there's a meta-ness to that, I know, but the takeaway is so impactful to me to know that it's not just theory. Like, this is true. This works. This is how people are connected to each other through our experiences and emotions. And so that was it was a good one.
Yeah. Well, and telling stories has probably changed many things in your life. But you talk about going to, I just blanked, but you went thinking I might be asked to tell a story. And you were, and then now 10 years later, or more than 10 years later, you are now the host. And so that was definitely a change in your life.
Oh, big time. Yeah. I think you're talking about the show that I am connected with. So it's The Moth, which is a beautiful, amazing organization. It's run out of New York. There are StorySLAM events all over the country.
StorySLAM is what I was trying to remember. Thank you.
So StorySLAM, and The Moth is the one that I work with and for. There are others. I think amazing is there's events that have popped up all over the place, and I'm excited. I get invited. So I just told a story at one in Sacramento, California. I'm going to Denver next week. I'm going to tell a story in a show there. There's events where people do that. And yes, so what a story slam is, if you are curious, is you do not have to tell a story. You could just go listen to people tell stories. But the format is that they don't pre-select who the storytellers are, what the stories are. So there's a theme. Usually you put your name in to say if you want to tell a story, and then there's some usually parameters. So the one the Moth has is that the story has to be 5 to 6 minutes. So it's short and true and done with no notes and on this theme, on this topic. So the show, the one that I went to, happened to be the first one that they had done in San Francisco. It was their first time. They were kind of growing and adding new sites and new cities as the podcast was growing in popularity. And I went to the first one and I told a story at it. And my story it's also judged. There's winners, and the judges chose my story as the best story, as the favorite story. And the crazy thing is that because it was the first one, the producer was like, we need a host for the next show. Could you host the next show? And I was like, I'd love to. So I hosted the next show. And then she goes, could you host the one after that? And then I did that. And ever since, I've been hosting every month for the past, more than 10 years of doing that. So I'm not saying that this is going to happen to everybody listening that tells a story at a show, but in my case, there was this real impact that it had. I hear just as much from people who aren't becoming the host of the show, but they're connecting with people. They find their people. Like you take this room full of strangers. When I'm doing this show in Berkeley, California, you're getting this insane cross-section of college students from UC Berkeley. You're getting old hippies who have grown up and, burned their bras and lived crazy, exciting lives. And now they might look like an 82-year-old grandma, but the stories that she tells about being a stripper in the 60s are shocking and lovely and amazing. And then after her, because it's a slam, you don't know who's coming up. You'll get someone who is a formerly incarcerated person telling about their life and their experience and their learnings. So all in all, you get this true cross-section of the communities and the worlds that we inhabit. I think a lot of entertainment, a lot of things that we experience are in our bubbles, the things that are the people that are just like us, and we're hearing this echo chamber. But if you want to hear about life in different contexts, go to a show, listen to people tell their stories, because it's a really remarkable and frankly uplifting way to feel better about your community and yourself.
You just happened to yes and yourself into 10 years of hosting.
I did, yeah. And it's been a really joyful place for me to not only get to tell stories, but the real secret, it's not just about me telling the stories. I get to listen to so many stories, which goes back to my rule number one. So to get better at it, I'd say to credit myself is because I've listened to a lot of stories and I've really learned from those storytellers.
Nice. I don't know a lot about improv, but the one thing that I do definitely know, and this is from one specific friend who talked to me about improv in college, but then other people beyond that, but he was where I learned it, was that concept of yes and. And as I said, Corey really yes and himself into this amazing chapter of his life where he has now gotten to spend 10 years not only telling stories, but listening to stories. Can you, I don't even know how many stories he has heard through all of the various aspects of his life. So he said, if you want to be a storyteller, the first thing you need to do is to listen. Well, he has definitely had that opportunity to listen to a lot of stories. We're going to take our next break of this episode. When we come back, is he working on a third book? Come back and find out. You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Corey Rosen. Before the break, Corey was talking about how one seemingly easy or simple decision to go to a StorySLAM and be prepared to possibly tell a story led to the next 10 years of his life of getting to tell stories and getting to listen to stories. Let's return to that conversation with Corey. 2 books so far. Are you working on a third?
I am. So currently I'm working on a book that has 3 different categories. And all I'll say right now is that they're dangerous stories that we are maybe told we shouldn't talk about or we're warned against. And so it's listening to people tell those stories and strategies for how to, let's say, tastefully or distastefully, or, in ways, how do we kind of make sense of these experiences in ways that we can process and share.
Yeah.
So dangerous storytelling is coming.
Okay. Nice teaser. That's good.
Yeah.
Is writing, obviously you said storytelling you've pretty much always been a storyteller, but writing specifically, did you always want to write, or did that come out specifically because you wrote that first book?
I have an honest answer for you, Sarah. After both of my books were finished, I loved having written them, but the writing process can be really hard. It's really challenging. And I think any writer who it just comes so naturally to them is either a liar or is very special, because I think it's hard. It's a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I have worked into my process is a bit of forgiveness and grace, to say that it's okay to write poorly. It's okay to write okay. There's a million reasons to not write. There's a million reasons to procrastinate or not do it, because it's easier to do anything else. The act of looking at a blank page is terrifying. So one of the kind of tools or tricks that I think I've developed for myself, in part is through storytelling, is by telling what I want to work on out loud, by telling it to a person, to a friend, to a child, to a room full of strangers, is a way of I'm figuring it out in ways that by the time I sit down to write it, I've actually processed a little bit. I've thought about it. So oral storytelling, I don't have that critic as much telling me don't do this, as I do when I'm writing and someone's like, no, go back, edit, fix, change. It's the idea of just blurting it out, getting a draft out, because then editing, while challenging, is easier when you have something to work on.
Yeah.
So for myself as a writer, I'd say I've been challenged, but I have been a writer for a long time. And at times I've done no writing. I've thought of myself as a writer, but I say I was waiting for inspiration. So really I was a waiter. I wasn't a writer. And so if there's anybody listening that's looking for a sign, this is your sign. Stop waiting, just tell a story. Tell a story. Maybe record it on your phone, maybe tell it in an Uber that you're sitting in, like that's one of my favorite tricks too. If I'm working on a story, you're sitting in a car with a stranger, and I'll just say hey, would you mind if I told you a story? And it's a little scary to ask that to a stranger, but they've never said no. And then I'll tell the story, and then they'll usually say, I like that. Or they'll ask questions.
Yeah.
And the questions are really helpful, because then I know I need to explain that in my story.
Right.
If there's follow-up questions, they're little tips. So we can be testing our material on people without even them knowing.
Yeah. Nice. Okay, I want to backtrack a little bit, because we talked about business, but it got me thinking that I talk about my husband, who is the massive extrovert to my massive introvert, but which is probably why he's in sales, because sales can involve a lot of story. But you've talked a little bit about the email that people can write. So do you have emails are so easy to check out on. What would you say about emails or storytelling in terms of sales or business or outreach?
Great question. We all get too many emails. I think that's a foregone thing. Something that everybody knows is that we're being constantly shown / sold things everywhere we look. So that's not just in our emails. It's if you're on social media, everything is an ad, everything is a promotion. Even the people that are promoting things. And it's easy to just ignore them. It's noise. And in sales, any kind of sales context, if you are presenting data and facts and figures, those are very forgettable and ignorable. Stories have a different way. If you can get someone invested in reading a story, then they're more interested. Blogs, I think, feel that way. If people write blogs and they feel like they're just trying to tell you something versus they're writing in their voice, then you're more inclined to read them and ingest them and process them. So if you're writing an outreach mail to someone and you're trying to catch them with marketing speak, like unleash your creativity or unlock the secret to such and such, we just feel like we're being sold, and those could be triggers. So in some sense, maybe they're powerful words, unleash, unlock, those kind of ideas, but they also could just as easily be written by an AI. And I think when we feel like we're reading something inauthentic, authenticity is a very important thing. So don't be inauthentic, find your way, and maybe take the time, take 5 minutes to see what happens if you write a personal letter and say, dear Sarah, I'm just hypothetically, dear Sarah, I would love to be on your podcast, and here's why.
Yeah.
I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I notice on these podcasts that this is what they do. And here's what you do differently on your podcast. And here's why I think we would have a good conversation. And then talk about yourself or something, where now they're talking to you. They're not just writing, they're not just sending the same thing to you that they're sending to everybody else. And you as a podcaster might say, I would like to talk to you. I'm not just going to help you out or whatever. And I'm the same way. If somebody wants to reach out or work with me, I am suspect if I get something that just feels salesy. It feels like I'm just going to be wasting time listening to you or talking to you about something that you're going to get out of it. If there's something that maybe I would be interested in too, or maybe I would actually need, without all the marketing speak. So someone's just being a little flawed, a little vulnerable is actually more interesting because it's human. So taking a chance, taking a risk, or finding some way of making it personal to the person you're talking with in some way. I'll give a brief example. Can I just tell it quickly on this? So, this might even be like in the room. Say you're in a pitch meeting or in a boardroom. You got to read the room before you start into your slides. Think about the number of people that you're walk in there and you're busy. Your brain is somewhere where the argument you just had, or the thing you've got to do next, you're in the future. And the hardest thing for all of us, I think, is just to be present, to just be here now. And thinking about what stories do, the neuroscience of storytelling has pointed to the fact that you have this concept of neural coupling, where you are actually on the same wavelength. They've measured using, MRI technologies, like where they're basically looking at brains of storytellers and story listeners, and their brains are synchronized in some capacity, that their patterns are mirroring each other. Whereas they've measured people who are just reading off like charts or data, and people who are listening, and they don't have the same patterns. So by finding what's now, what's true, what's here, what's real, not what I prepared to tell, but creating presence and that kind of connection builds trust, builds communication. And then when you say, now, do you mind if I talk about this thing that I prepared? Oh, please. Now I'm open to hearing your pitch, your message, or whatever. And I might even want to partner or collaborate or buy.
Yeah. And don't read your PowerPoint slides to me, because I can do that myself.
Please don't read them. Less words, pictures. Storytelling.
Yeah. We've talked about storytelling, listening, speaking. What about reading? When you read just for you, what do you like?
Yeah. Lately I like to read a lot. I read a lot of nonfiction, although right now I'm reading Walden by Thoreau. Just for his use of language. I just really appreciate the specificity and the adjectives and the descriptive details. He'll make an entire chapter just about the ice and the bubbles under the ice and the way that they form and the way they collect and the way they break through and reform. So right now I'm just really like exploring that aspect of it, because as a storyteller, I think it's something that I can do better. Is I do spend a lot of time telling about what happened, but when I tell you what happened, you're only getting one kind of dimension of the story. I think about stories as multidimensional, and the what happens is one dimension, the descriptive detail helps me to see it, visualize it, imagine it. So that's a second and I think very powerful dimension, which is what I'm learning from Thoreau's writing. But also the third dimension is emotion, the inner. How did I feel? How did it impact me? What did it make me think about? Those kind of things. So that is what I'm working on right now as a storyteller, is how can I be more dimensional as a storyteller? So by reading other writers, that's what I'm looking at.
Yeah. We've been talking throughout this interview about listening. If you want to tell stories, listen to how people tell stories. So it's really interesting to me to hear Corey talk about what he's reading and how he really seems to listen to the stories that he's reading. He's paying attention to, as he was talking about Thoreau and how Thoreau describes things. He listens to the story and sees how that story is being told and what's being included and how things are described. I mean, I listen to audiobooks, but never really thought about listening while I'm reading, because I'm listening to the voice in my head, I guess, while I'm reading. But I don't know. It's interesting. I'm going to think more about that concept of listening to the books that we read, even if we're not listening to an audiobook. We're going to take our final break of this episode. When we come back, you know I'm nosy. If someone has kids, I want to know what they're reading. So that's what we're going to talk about. You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and the conclusion of my conversation with author Corey Rosen. Before the break, Corey was talking about what he has been reading. So let's go ahead and return to the conversation with Corey. You have high schoolers, right?
I have a high schooler and a college sophomore.
Oh, okay, high school. So what are they reading? Do they talk to you about what they're reading?
Oh, yeah. My son was a rower, so he just finished reading The Boys in the Boat, and he's actually in a book club, and I'm trying to remember what book he is reading in his book club. But my daughter is a high school student, so she just finished a what is she reading right now? I know she's reading Rick Rubin's book, which is about creativity, which I stole from her. So she's like, I need that. I'm like, I'll read it fast. I just need to read this book. So that's.
So you're going to be the modern equivalent of the dog ate my homework. My dad stole my book. He won't give it back to me.
Dad stole my book. He won't give him back my book. Yeah. I told her you can borrow it back when you're ready, but I need it right now because I really like this book.
You're going to have to write her a note. Okay, so if people want to know more about your writing, website, if you have one, any social media that you're active on?
I do. I'm active on a variety of social media platforms. I put up videos on TikTok and YouTube under Your Story Well Told is my company and my first book and my kind of social media identity. I also am on Instagram as Story Rosen. Because my name is Corey Rosen. So I have Story Rosen identity. And then, of course, my website, Your Story Well Told, has lots of stuff. It's got tons of free resources, articles and blogs that I've written about storytelling and about ideation and different types of stories. Of course, you can contact me too, because I do consulting and I do teaching and I lead group and individual workshops and one-on-ones to help you tell your stories better. So if it's a workshop for your team or your company, or it's just you as an individual, please find me, CoreyRosen.com or YourStoryWellTold.com.
Okay. Thank you. Corey, is there anything that we have not covered that you wanted to make sure you highlighted during our time together?
No, I just like telling stories with you, Sarah. Maybe next time you can tell me more. I feel like I talk too much.
Oh, no. See, that's the ideal place for me as the host. I get to listen. And I'm the type
you're
of
good at
person
your
that if you
job.
ask me a question, my brain goes. So yeah, actually,
Oh,
that's a good point. In reading your book, I kept thinking about past job interviews and what stories could I have told, because I have stories. Everyone has stories. I feel
yeah.
like I have this great story, but where on earth do I tell it? And then
You want to
like,
tell me one quick one before we're done?
oh no, because I
You've
couldn't
got to
think of a
go.
single story right now. Uh, which is where I get in interviews. Like they ask me a question and I sort of freeze. So no matter how
Yeah.
much I practice, because you can't practice
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
So
There's an art to
yeah,
that. There's an art
that
to
that was
being present, listening to them, responding to them, and then saying like, and this is what I try to do is like, where might there be a story in there? Yeah, it's a challenge, but
yeah. Okay,
it's a
I
good
will
one.
tell you one story that I thought of earlier when you were talking about tell someone, and it's not
Please.
quite telling someone, but in my previous job as when I had to do a lot of public speaking, and no matter how many times I do it, I still get nervous. And so the best speaking partner I ever had was my middle niece when she was a newborn. I would lay her on the bed and I would tell her what I had to do. And she would lay there and of course she just loves the individual attention of Auntie talking just to her and she would smile and she would kick. And so I was talking to someone. I wasn't just talking to an empty room. But this
Yes.
little baby was the best story partner.
I love that you had a captive audience who
Yeah.
was appreciating the attention. She loved
Right.
the attention you were giving to her. You were getting to do something that you had to work on.
Yeah.
That's a great tip. So,
Yeah.
everybody out there that's working on a story, find a baby.
RO and newborn. Yeah, exactly. But
Maybe we need to start a service, you
oh,
and me, Sarah and
yeah.
Corey's baby rental.
We got to workshop
New
that
name,
title.
better name. All right. Yeah. If you got
We're
names,
gonna,
put them in the comments for this
right.
episode. Yeah.
Otherwise, we're gonna end up, I don't know, on a list somewhere of
Yeah.
the
I think we're already on that list. That's too late.
good point. Well, thank you so much. This was so much fun. I really appreciate you taking time just to tell me stories. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
Thank you again to Corey for joining me to talk about telling stories, listening to stories, crafting stories, using those stories in so many ways that maybe you've never thought of. I will be returning to this book in the future, and actually, I would love to be able to go time travel into the past, somewhere in my 20s, maybe before I went to college, even give this to my past self and say, here, use this. You are going to encounter so many times in your life when this would be helpful. Because I have had so many experiences and jobs that could have benefited from me being a better storyteller. I have stories. Of course, I have stories. Do I always tell them well? Do I always remember them in the moment? No. But I had so many ideas sparking throughout the reading of this. And like I said, you don't have to read it straight through. You can go to the chapter that seems like it will be the most helpful. You can look at the reading or the writing prompts. You can look at the exercises that he gives and see which ones you think will work for you and what is sparking ideas for you personally and where can you use those stories and how will they be helpful. It's always good to be thinking about those things. But it's definitely a book that I'm going to be returning to. So if you have wished you could be a better storyteller in certain circumstances in your life, if you've never thought about how you could be a storyteller in any circumstance in your life, this is the book for you. Like, it's a book that I think anyone could use, no matter you might be thinking, oh, I don't need stories for my line of work. There's lots of other places that you might need stories for. So you never know when you might need to craft a good story and want to know how to go about it. Where should you start? What should you even do to begin that story? And this book has a lot of answers for you. I'm intrigued by the third book and its dangerous stories, but that's the teaser. That's all we get. We'll have to find out when that book comes back. Maybe Corey will come back and I can ask him all sorts of questions about dangerous stories. But if you are interested at all in crafting stories for everyday circumstances in your life, then definitely check out this book by Corey. And thank you to you, of course, for joining me for this conversation. Thank you to Corey once again for joining me for this conversation. I hope that you will come back for the next episode when I am talking with author Emily Sayre-Smith about her book, Smartass, Memoir of a Mouthy Girl. I love that title. There is just from the title alone, a little bit of language in this. I've already spoken with Emily. She is very funny, very interesting. She has led quite the interesting life. So this is a memoir of her life growing up with an Episcopalian priest for a father, with a mother who could MacGyver basically anything. Very, very smart mother who could do a lot of things, but a story of dysfunction and learning to move past that dysfunction. She was a ballet dancer for many years. She is gay, so coming out not only to family but also in the world of ballet. I thought it was a fascinating conversation. I thought it was a really funny, well-crafted book. So I hope you will join me for that conversation on the next episode with Emily Sayre-Smith. In the meantime, if you are a fan of this podcast, please do like, follow, and subscribe on whatever platform you're either listening to or watching the episode on. Another thing that really helps is a review. Ooh, maybe that's a place you could use a story. That would be awesome. But a positive review, no matter if you write a story or not, it can be one line, really does help the podcast get out to more readers such as yourselves. Positive reviews help your authors as well. If you have a favorite author and a favorite book, leave that a review so more people can find it and enjoy it as much as you did. Positive reviews are amazing. You can also follow the podcast on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. Come find the podcast. You're going to get me, but you can tell me stories. Please do tell me stories about what you've been reading, about authors that you love, about your reading goals for this year, about how you read. Just, I'm nosy. I love to know these things. So come find me on social media. I hope you're having a great week. I hope that you have something wonderful planned for this weekend. If that's celebrating with family and friends, if that is, staying in bed and reading all weekend, if that is cleaning your house, if that's what you need to do and that's what you want to do, whatever your weekend has, I really hope it is wonderful in some ways. But you know that my biggest hope for you is always that you find time to get yourself lost in a good book. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time.